There you
Yep.
go. Hi, my name is Edmond and I'm here to refute the claim that children with Down syndrome help their parents and siblings to be better people. Now, the first secondary claim that this person made was that children with Down syndrome teach families to learn important values. The second claim is that children with Down syndrome tend to give their families a better outlook on life. And the third secondary claim they make is that children with Down syndrome help their families to accept and understand the disabled population. Now I have a few questions for you guys. First question, how many of you guys hate waiting for people? Rhetorical question, you guys all hate waiting for people. Second question, how many of you have been around or have seen a disabled person? Rhetorical question, everybody here has seen or been around a person with a disability, whether you volunteer or whether you see them around. Now I believe we should start by looking at my opponent's claim. She believes that only positives result from Down syndrome. But I believe that we need to take a look at the other side, that there are negative consequences to Down syndrome. To start, I'll start by defining Down syndrome, also known as trisomy 21. Down syndrome is defined as the instance when a human being develops an extra copy of chromosome 21. This actually results in problems in body development. So in response to the first claim that children with Down syndrome teach families to learn important values, looking at Down syndrome education online, they state that 30 to 35% of families with a child that has Down syndrome actually show signs of considerable distress. My opponent used support from Jill Letterman that tells us that people with Down syndrome, people who have experience with Down syndrome, actually learn from these people that they tell us to slow down. But the world today is actually very fast-paced. People are not judged on how slow they can do things. People are judged on how fast they can complete tasks. Care.com actually tells us that parents who require special care for these Down syndrome children often have problems with work because as those of us who have jobs and are looking for jobs know, we are given vacation days. But oftentimes with disabled children, we actually run out of those days and problems arise when your boss finds out that you cannot work all the days that you need to work. In response to the second claim, and the second secondary claim that children with Down syndrome tend to give their families a better outlook on life, my opponent uses evidence from Mark Leach, who states that 88% of siblings felt that they were better people because of Down syndrome and because of the experience they had with siblings that incurred this disease. However, this is actually, this falls into the fallacy of mob appeal. This is trying to prove that because the majority of people actually felt better from this experience, that we do not need to worry about those that actually had a negative experience with Down syndrome. By looking at a study by Carrie Stedman from Boston Children's Hospital, she conducted a study of 2,044 guardians. 5% of them actually said that they were embarrassed of their child, and 4% said that they wished that they did not have their child. She did another study with 812 siblings, brothers and sisters, and they said that 7% of them were embarrassed of their siblings, and 4% of them wished that they could trade in their siblings. In response to the third secondary claim, that children with Down syndrome help their families to accept and understand the disabled population. In actuality, all of the evidence that my opponent uses actually hinders her major claim. The view of disabled people actually becomes more pessimistic than optimistic. From my opponent's support from Siegfried's Down syndrome, Growing and Learning, we get an account of a mother's experience with her own Down syndrome child. She states that first she had to realize what her son or daughter might never be. This is what this view does is that it actually limits the view of the child. It does not give them the opportunity to grow, to surpass limits, but limits them to something that we can accept, that we don't expect them to surpass. Down syndrome education online states that the main negative effects of Down syndrome were restrictions on family activities and restrictions on mothers' lives. Parents and siblings can develop the view that Down syndrome is burdensome and that it requires more care than they can provide. Those of you that have been to the hospital know that hospital care is not cheap. So we know that oftentimes those that cannot afford it have major stress on them due to work, due to the inability to pay for medical care, and basically the inability to care for their child. In conclusion, children with Down syndrome may encourage caregivers and families to rise to the occasion and to better themselves as a result. However, the toll of such stress and the time consumption especially, it definitely hinders the development of all parties involved. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a little tough making an argument that says that the Down syndrome kids suck. That's just rude. and I thought you balanced it pretty well by arguing that really the issue is, are there complications and problems, and does the advocate simply ignore those complications and problems? You're not denying that some people might have a benefit or that there could be an improvement in people's outlooks, but you're suggesting that there is also some significant consequence here, and I thought that you did a pretty good job on that, especially on the first point, talking about the stress that the families are under and the problems that are faced by families because of having a Down syndrome child. That doesn't mean that they don't want the kids or that there's automatically a divorce or something like that, but it does recognize that it is a challenge, and the question then becomes, is that challenge something that's easily met, or are there benefits to it? That's, I think, what the advocate's response would be. They would probably say, yeah, well, we have those challenges, but it's overcoming those challenges that give us our values and improve our appreciation or outlook on life. You do kind of set up this argument about speed and time, and I think that that's a little bit of a place where you may be running into some backlash on that argument, suggesting that because Down syndrome kids are going to affect how quickly families can manage things, or their ability to respond to things in a particular way, that there could be problems. I did think that your analysis on the second point, suggesting that the advocate's evidence here was mob appeal, is an interesting point. Maybe I think you want to point out, of course, it's self-reported. Let's face it, it's how likely is it that somebody's going to say about their brother or sister to a researcher, yeah, I can't stand my brother or sister and I wish I had somebody else, or those kinds of things. Unless you are 5 or younger, every kid knows that would be hurtful to their family. So the likelihood that they would actually say how they feel, I think you've got to make an argument that says that it's unlikely that this is really representative. And the truth of the matter is, if we got 5 and 7% that they're saying, 5% of the parents and 7% of the siblings that are saying this is horrible, awful, bad, it's probably underrepresented here because people wouldn't want it to reflect that negatively on them. So I think you've got an interesting argument here. It's a reasonable press. It does feel a little bit like you're stretching on that particular point. And then the idea about the limitations, it's... I just don't know what the dispute is on some of this issue. It's nice, it's valid to say that there are some things that you have to overcome, and you learn to overcome them. Would people prefer not to face those kinds of things? Maybe. The cost issues and the time issues, with a lot of hypotheticals on this. So I thought you did a pretty reasonable job arguing it, despite the fact that it's kind of a complicated context in which to argue. All right, thank you.